have our selection set up and we're ready to take a look at how we can use them. Now, since we don't need this anymore, there's a little arrow here that we can do, and we could just move it over so we have more screen space to be animating with. And then our selection set HUD that you can see here, we can minimize it and maximize it. You can also lock it just on there so that it'll never move from there. If you unlock it, you can move it around as you're animating. And so let's take a look at what we can do with this now. So if we open this up, we can see that we have all the groups, all the sets that I have created, and we'll go over these in a little bit, but we're going to take a look at just right now with Electra Block. And I use this is my blocking path, so I have less controls on here as I start blocking, so I don't have to key as many controls and manage as many controls. So what we can do is on here, you can just click on it and you can start turning off a whole bunch of other things. So if we just want to look at the block, we can turn this off and go down it from there. What I do is I use Control Shift and I left click on there and we can isolate them. And then as I go through, if I wanted to have some more things in here, some more detailed ones, I can just still click on this to isolate more and more controls. And by default, I should have mentioned that when you create a character, Electra in there, you automatically get a selection set with all controls in here as well, and the character display. So you can, if I take these off, what I can do is just with her Electra, I can globally turn off all the controls or her display or both. But of course we want to see Electra, and then I can just isolate these in here. Now the other thing you'll notice here is a little pinning button here. And what I could do is, because I know this is what I want to key. I want to key all the controls in here. So when I pin this, what this does is scopes out my channels for me. And scoping channels, all that means is it puts it into your graph editor so you have all your channels for those controls that you have set up. So you don't have to think anymore about what you're keying. So as you're posing your character out, if I'm just grabbing the character and posing it here, when I hit, if I take off the pinning, you can see it's just got that control in there. So if I hit K to key it, it only keys that control, but nothing else has a key on it. But when I pin this, even if I'm not selected on anything, I key it. Now it'll key all those controls for me. So if I look at this, it's got everything in there. You can see the little pin in there. And this is all the controls in my blocking group. So this is really handy to be able to make sure that you're keying what you want to key and you're not missing any controls as you're animating and moving along from there. So from there, what we could do is we could start posing our character. And there's a couple of things here. If I hit Shift F1, you can see there's a bunch of little hints and tips in there. And there's a few things in here we'll go over to do it. And one of them is G, which is the channel widget. So if we bring up G, now we can see, if I select this control here that I moved, we can see that I have keys on there and the values that we have on there. We also have this little broom here that when you click on it, now it just resets at the default, goes back to zeros in there. So it's helpful to be able to just select multiple controls and clean them all up, go back to zero. We also have a copy and paste feature here, and we can also snap controls to the last selected. So if I had that and I shift select this and go there, you can see now it's snapping that control to there. But again, we can just do that sweep and do it. And when you hit G again, then it just goes away. So it's just up when you need that value. So the next thing I want to talk about is our global transform mode, Control Shift. And this is something I use 100% of the time, all the time in all my animation going on. So I'm just going to switch this to 100 just so we can see our ticks a little bit better. And what it is if I go here and I'm just going to hit K, and because I have this pinned, it said I key on all my channels, all my controls that are part of this Electra block group. So now for the Control Shift, what this does is it allows us to move controls around any pivot, and it'll work with our last selected pivot. So if I wanted to select the hands and the CLG, and I wanted to make her bend sideways. Normally when you do that, if you grab this, you rotate it, everything just rotates around its own axis that it has there. But if you hold Control G, now it moves the controls all together. So you could start just rotating the character around without having to do it. So if I went back to here, And again, if I want to go back to the default, I can just sweep everything. Okay, make sure that I get everything keyed in that group and get rid of that is after. So now we've been able to pose that character really quickly. And I should have, if I wanted to, I could have grabbed the pole vectors as well for this to do it. But instead of moving these individually like this and moving them around, again, what we could do is if I went onto this, I can select these. And I'm going to select the arm controls as well, just to have it. And again, it's around whatever my last pivot is. So if I have it here and I use control, if I don't use control shift, it just moves like this. If I use control shift, then you can see it's moving around that pivot that we have here. And that's essentially what I've set up here. So I have a few things. So I just have my upper body mover. You can see the handles here, and now we can just do that. So really quickly, we can just kind of have our group set up so that we could start animating our character as we want from there. So if we wanted to, we can even just take the entire character, rotate it up. But the one thing I want to mention, let me just go into here and just sweep everything again, is that if we open this up, now the one thing is if I wanted to create a new set, let me just create a new set here like we had, but I'm going to have this arm selected last. And now in here we can do the same thing. We can right click and we can create a set from selected, put it on here, and I'm just going to name this test right now. So now whenever I grab this, it'll grab it, but I don't want that pivot. I want it to be in the center here. So if we take a look at our selection set pane, because again, this is one of the points where we have a few extra things in here so that when you're setting it up, you could do it. Now you can see there's a little highlighted one here, and that's where our primary control is. So every time we select this set, it's going to put the pivot there, but I don't want it there. I want it on my COG. So all we have to do is go to the COG. If we right click on that, now we can go make primary control. And you can see it's switched to, the highlight switched to here. So now if I click off of it and I click that, now we have the proper pivot for doing all of our animation in there. So once you have that, so if you ever make a mistake, you set it up with the wrong pivot, you can just go in there and make the primary pivot to whatever you want it to be so that when you select things, it'll be in the right spot. So from there, we're going to get into a few more animation things going on from here, but hopefully that's a good start to understand how we could start using selection sets with displays, with our pinning, scoping our channels, and being able to set pivots so that we can use our global transform mode of Control Shift to be able to move groups of controls around together. So here we have an example of dynamic motion. And there's two main ways we can use dynamic motion. One of them is when you're hitting a mark, where you're saying something happens at this frame. So now that we have our selection sets all set up, we've used our Control Shift to get used to being able to global transform mode to move controls around any pivot. We can start doing a few more things. But before we get into that, I want to show you that some options. So you may have a different looking handle from me, and that's because I've set up my handle for the way I like it. So I'm just going to minimize this, and now we have a little bit bigger space to work. That's all set up. We've used our Control Shift to get used to being able to global transform mode to move controls around any pivot. We can start doing a few more things. But before we get into that, I want to show you that some options. So you may have a different looking handle from me, and that's because I've set up my handle for the way I like it. So I'm just going to minimize this, and now we have a little bit bigger space to work with. When I hit P, we now have a few options in here that we can have. So there's a few steps for just how it'll rotate. There's the line width, so if you can just go on here, you can make it fatter or thinner depending on how much you like it. There's the scale factor, so how big that handle is when you're selecting that control, you can make it tiny or big. There's also the brightness, so if you wanted to, you can dim it down if it seemed a little bit too bright and you want it to be a little bit dimmer. And we have a few other options here that we can take a look at. One of them is draw handles in all viewports. So if you click this on and use space B, now you can see the handle is in every viewport. I don't need that. I usually just like it in whatever viewport I'm in. You can see it going from there to do it. And if we go back onto our perspective viewport, Shift B, we can get back to our single view. There's also showing the handle planes where you can just have this, and now if you move it, it'll only move on that that plane that you have selected, and you can see we have them for all the different planes that you can have. I generally don't use those too much, and then we have an alternate rotate mode. So normally when you grab this, you rotate it down, you rotate it up, going from there. But what we could do is, if we use the alternate rotate mode, now you can just drag it in a line. So you don't have to rotate it around. You can see the little dotted line showing up in there. So you can test that out. And then the other thing that you can see here is translate axis outside the rotate sphere. So normally it's all on the inside here, but that can make selecting some of them a little bit tough because you get the overlap on everything here. But by selecting it on the outside, now it's much easier to select your translate handles going on. There's also an option here. Normally what I do is I select it and then I move it. And I guess I should mention here, if you hit M, you could cycle through a bunch of different orientations that you have on here. And what you can also do is, in this, if you use E, there's no scale on here, but that would be scale. R for rotate, T for translate, and if you hit Y, you can now just kind of toggle between all those different modes. So if we wanted to, for taking a look at use click and drag, so I have it off. So what this means is I have to select something and then I can move it. If you have this on, what it means is that you just select it and it moves right away. I make too many mistakes because as I'm moving quickly, I basically take something I don't want it to move. So I have this off personally, but some people really like to be able to just select it and move it right away instead of doing the double, instead of selecting it, then moving it. Again, all for your personal preference that you have on there. You can also use X-ray, so you can see it's not X-rayed on there, or you can decide just how strong that X-ray is, so you can make it a little bit dimmer as it goes back. And then the other option here is hide controls during playback. So with that checked on, when I press play, it turns off all the controls so you can see things easier. If that's off and you press play, the controls stay on. So those are a few the different parameters that you can set up to play around with to see how you like it and make the handle the way you want. The other thing that we can have on here is if you right click on the handle, you can see with our alignments, and I said with M you can toggle through it, so world, local, and everything, but we can also separate the alignments. And normally this is what I do is I click on the separate alignments, and then what I like is my alignment for my translates to be world. So there's no Y is up, so I can always move things directly up as I want, but that the local to be bending around hinges, especially like ankles and wrists and everything, they stay the same. Again, you can set this up however you want. This does not currently save with your file, but we're looking at that. So, but you can just keep on just switching it as you need it as you're playing around with things. All right. So now that we have all those handles done up, we will just select everything, hit G, and sweep it again. And we'll take a look at some tools that we have going on here. So the first thing I'm going to do is in here, I have an all mover one, and this just allows me to move the entire character without needing another control added in there for that. So if I go here, I actually should have been on here. Since I was on frame 1, let me just get this and sweep this. And let's go to frame 10. We're going to use our upper body mover, or our all mover, and rotate the character up here and set a key. And since we have it pinned, it will guarantee to key all those blocking channels that we want. So that's great now that I've been able to move that. But what if I wanted to dangle her from her feet? I don't have a pivot up here, so I can't move it from there. We could take it from the leg, and just with that all mover, we could still do everything and rotate it around that foot if we wanted to. But what we can also do is we could start using one of our tools. And up here, you can see our pose tools, and there's a locator button here. But if you hold C, you also have a radial menu, and we can just do add locator here. And now simply what we could do is when we're in a tool, you can see these change a little bit. So you can see there's different options, just so you have little hints of what the hotkeys will be. So if you hit H, that'll create a new locator. If you have something selected, so if I had this foot and I said H, it would create a constraint between those two. But I don't want the constraint right now, so I'm going to just click off of it and I'm going to hit H. And you can see it's created a little null there. Now there's a few options that we have on this null when we select it, is that if you use your middle mouse button, you can change the shape of it there. So you can see that the shapes are changing however you want it to be. You can even have different like geometry shapes in there if you want. And if you hold shift down and use the middle mouse button, you can scale it up. So we'll just take a look at this. I'm just going to use this little cone here that we have on there. And now what I could do is I can use this to rotate my character about. So if I wanted to make her be dangling from there, we can do that. And we can set up a new set from that too, just to make it even easier. So we have our all mover here. So I just select that. I'm going to select the locator. I'm going to right click in here and create set from selected. And I'm just going to call this dangle. So really quickly, now every time I could just select this, and now when I use Control Shift, I can now swing her around here. So if we wanted to, you can see it's all going up here. We're just going to start from 10, but I also had this and I didn't want it. So what we can also take a look at is if we right click on our time bar, we can show our animation toolbar. And this is where our animation sliders live. And you have lots of different options in here. There's, if I make these tool size, if I make it compact, you can see there's a whole bunch in here. Too much to go over. Generally, if I use maybe 4 or 5, but everyone's different of how they use it. Some of them work better for more for graph editor doing it versus viewport. But we'll take a look at this right now, and I'm just gonna make this nice and big again. Tool size, extra wide. And one of the things that I could do is that I can blend it to the neighbor. So just using the dangle, this is my neighbor key here. And what I can do is I can just drag this over and now she's upside down. So really quickly, you're able to get to those poses and fix them all up as you want. And now that we have this new dangle holding with this selected, it'll key it. I can also just pin this if I wanted to, but now we get the key on there and you can see the keying now goes a bright green versus a dull green on there. So if we wanted to and we wanted to swing this character, what we can do is just put her there, and I already have a key on there, so it can go down here, and then we can go over to 20, and we can just rotate her up there, set a key on there. Again, I should probably pin this just to make sure that's keyed there, and now we get this rotation going on here. Now this isn't switching the interpolation, it's still a linear IK translation for all the IK controls that we have here. So if I just shift select this and hit delete, we can see how this is behaving. So now just with the 2 keys, you can see it's a linear translation from the hands, and it's getting all squished in there. So if you wanted to, easy way to fix this up is, again, you could just go blend to neighbor and then rotate it around here. And now we get the better translation because you're just doing a breakdown in there. So there's a lot of ways that you can start using that. So now we can also, once we create it, we can just go back into our animation and we can start doing everything from there. And we could still use everything if we wanted it. If we wanted to use the lower body mover, we could start changing the position of that, how this actually did it the wrong way. Say we want to do a little bit of a drag on there. So this can go down and you can start playing around with these things as much as you want. So I hope that makes sense for using your selection sets, being able to set up different things, using your locator to add a different pivot that you want to be in there, being able to select, create a new control, new set, blending it to neighbors, doing your breakdowns in there, and getting these to be animated as you need be. So, and you can do it again as much as you want. You can just do that and start breaking it down a little bit more, just as you want to go from there. So next we're going to be taking a look at a little bit more about animation. Now this has mostly just been posing tools and using the selection sets and our control shift and starting to use some tools in our animation sliders to go on. we'll start getting into more animation as we move on next. Control Shift for our global transform mode, start posing our character, taking a look at some animation sliders and our locator. Let's actually take a look at adding a couple more objects in here. So if we want to add a table and chair, how do we go about doing that? And it's essentially the same setup that we went through for Electra. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit Tab and type in F-I-L-E, and we'll grab a file. Now in here, I'm just going to grab this, and we can see I have some assets already, so I'm just going to grab a dining table, hit accept there, and if I put the display on there, we can see that we have the dining table on here. And I'm just going to hit escape from here so that we're not in the animation state right now, just so we can look at the table itself. Now the next thing we're going to do is tap Tab and SCE, and we'll get to Apex Scene. And last time we did add character for Electra, but this time we're going to do scene add prop. And what this will do is this will give us a point that we can start animating with. If you wanted a table with a full rig, you should probably build a rig for it. But this allows you to be able to not know anything about rigging, being able to start animating with the table and using that control for doing other things such as ragdoll. But the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to take this and plug this in here. And in our scene add prop, again, we're going to rename it, and we're just going to name this table. And if you look at the parameters in here, we have a few options. So if I put the display on here and just hit enter, now you can see that we have our control. It's a torus, and we can change the color. We can make that yellow if we want. We can change the torus to be a box, a ball. There's a few options in here. I'm just going to leave this on torus. And we can do with the shape offset, we can actually just start changing it so you could scale it down a bit. If you want to move it, you could do that as well. We'll just leave it there. We'll get to ragdoll eventually, and don't worry about the rest position right now. That's just for getting your starting point, and this all works for this. So now we have a table in here. But if I take a look at our scene animate, we just have Electra. So how do we put that table in there? Well, again, what we can do is just follow this orange line that we have here. So if we plug this in here, and then we plug this in here, now you can see the orange line plugging in, goes scene animate. And now in our scene animate, we have not only Electra, but if you look at this, we have a table. And we can turn the control on or off, or display on or off as well. So really quickly, we've now just added a table into the scene. Now, what I can also do is if I select this, this file, and if I hold down Alt and left click and drag it over and then release, you can see that I've just copied that. You can also use Control C or in Control V if you want to do it. And in this case, I'm going to pick the dining stool. And I'm going to hit accept. Now we'll just hit enter on this, and you can see where the dining stool, you can't see anything. But that's because this was built in a different spot. It wasn't built in the origin. Instead of adding a scene add prop and trying to move it out there, what we can just do is use a SOP, which is called center. So this is where knowing some of the SOPs, a few SOPs can really help you out here. So if I just take this file and I plug it in there and we take a look at this, you can see, let me just reload this geometry. Oh, sorry, I put it into the wrong piped in, put it in there. You can see that it's now at the origin, but obviously we want it on the ground, so we can just take the justify Y and put none. And now we have that in there, right in the spot for us to ready to use. And we'll do the same thing, tab, scene, add prop, Apex scene add prop, add that in, plug it into the left side here. We will name this chair. We can go in here, we can change the color to be, say that. We can change this to be a box on there instead of the, and we can just scale this box up a little bit, make it easier to see. And there we go, now we have that. And we do the exact same thing. We just plug this one into this orange there, and we plug this one into the scene animate. And now when we look at the scene animate, now we can have our chair in there, and we have our table in there, and we have Electra. So really quickly, we're able to just be able to use our asset. In this case, this is a character, which is Electra. This is the table. This is the dining stool. We add a character or we add a prop and we change the name on it. Oh, sorry, that was the center. Then we add the prop and then we go in there. So it's just, you can see it's just following this orange line as it goes into our scene animate. So next what we'll take a look at, and you can see when we do it, it creates a little set already for this, so you can turn these things on or off. And one last thing, just to mention, if you want to organize your scene, maybe you have a few different things. If you select node, if you hit Z, now you can actually change the shape of these nodes as you want in there. So if you prefer files to be a different shape, you could do that. If we can also hit C and we can add a color on there. So if you want to color code everything that you want. If you want to select everything, you can put a little box around it too, and you can name this set. And then if you want, you can use the color as well. So if you color the whole thing in there, and then you can minimize it into one just node if you want. So there's a few options, however you want to set it up to be able to make it feel right for you, easy to visually see things, and decide how you want to lay out your nodes in here. So next we're going to take a look at getting some animation onto this. And I'm going to take a look at a file that I've already set up, because this isn't about how to animate, it's about how to animate in Houdini. And we can take a look of how we can get Electra into the scene, sitting on the chair and standing up. So now that we have everything all set up, focus on that one area. So it's really Electra, and I could turn it on, and I could be using focus on the areas that you want, and double click out when you want to go back Electra in here and set the entire area. But to save some time, if you right click on the bookmark, I already have a file. There's also a bookmark here that I've set up. So if you have multiple bookmarks, you can change the colors in it's all set up the same way, except that change the ranges, doing the set first and then doing Electra. So there's a bunch of things that you can do. I just have a very simple animation here. It's just every 5 frames. Now if I wanted to take a look at this and I wanted to do just an animation, a flipbook. So I could copy this whole, you can see is over here, we have a flipbook. And if I right click on that into the other one, settings, there's a bunch of settings that we have. Our same selection start and end here will just give me the range that I already have. What I can do is I can select that setup. And there's other things you can have some fake select the curves, hit Control C for the size. I'm just and now what I can do is I can go into and what I'm going to do is just hit start. File that we have no animation. What this will do is this will generate select the set for me. Since it's the same set, just that animation that it's going to be going through the same curves. And we're going to get the whole range. And now just pasted that animation that we don't need file. And you can see now I have. So the one good thing about the bookmarks that we can do really quick way is if we wanted to only work on that animation from one scene animate area here to another, and of course we're working on what I can do is I can double click in this, and now when I actually click on this again, set up a file if you want with some hand poses you can copy and paste those poses as needed. See something changing here. Now I'm just going to for here, if I wanted to, we could take a look at just so we can see the difference just on this area here. And now when I do is if I just it's only going to play through that in the bottom of the one area. Drag it over. What I could do is right click on that. So I don't have to spend all the time doing all this flip-booking everything. I can just flip book a new area and it'll go right into that one spot. So it saves time for whatever you want. Put some comments in there if you need it. And now I'm just going to, especially if you have a really disconnect this. And now when I do any other flip books, you just want to focus on one area. Instead of changing your range there, you can just have your bookmark set up, and you can just double click into there, and now you just focus on that one area. So it's really animation to be able to. And if I double click, focus on the areas that you want. And now we have another feature that's in here that it's actually been in for quite a while. And so if you right click on the bookmark, and what you can see here is also go to my output. So if you have multiple bookmarks, you can change the colors in here. Check off this scope channel keyframes only, and enable blockade or not. So there's a bunch of things. And now when I select Electra, if I select her Electra block. Now if I wanted to take a look at this and I wanted to do with all those keys that I have those channels and control scope, all you can see is over here we have a now when I hit start, right click on that flipbook with new settings, what you can see is that there's a bunch of settings that we have. But the start and end here will just give me the range that those frames that I have. So you can see it's held that I have set up. So it's and there's other things you can give me a flipbook with my keys for the size. I'm just going to keep the size right here. If I what I'm going to do is just hit start this to be 100. And what this will do, and now what we can do is generate wanted to or me slow things of just that animation. So if we wanted to make it so as she's getting up here, the whole range is taking a little bit longer, struggling a bit more, that we can just select that range here. You can just the one good thing about the middle click on this and then drag the end out. If we wanted to only work on that, changing it there, area here, this area here, start moving around. And what I can do is I can do a lot more in here. And now when I actually quickly, but now you can see it's taking a lot longer to get up. Even if we wanted to do something where we just so we could see, just have a little delay at the front of this to take a little bit longer before she stands up, just so we can see the difference in there really quickly. And you can see, and now when I hit frames before, it's just going to hold it. It's only going to play through that. So really quickly, we're able to start moving. So I don't have to spend all the time doing all this flip booking just with a few keys. I can just flip book to a new area and I'll go right into that. And it's not affecting anything. It saves time from doing. The scene is fast enough that I could actually do the same thing in here. And now I'm just going to, but then I'm changing my animation. Now when I do any other flip books, so with this, I'm able to try a bunch of things. You can be sitting down with your supervisor and let's just hit looking at it, seeing if I have the time working. If you're opposed to pose animation, you can actually, and if I double click, set back keys 1 to 20. Now we have another feature in a row just with all your poses that it's actually been in for quite a while. But it's called. But now that we have it all here, say this is what you can see here is if I go to my output, what we can do is put these all back onto our keys and adjust it. Check off this scope channel keyframes only and enable block editing. Now when we click on that, and now when I select Electra, all my keys down at the bottom, Electra block. And so now really quickly I've been able to change everything on there, scope that I have. Now when I hit start, now I've been able to retime everything. What you can see is that it'll generate a handy little thing, especially for blocking. If you want to start retiming things quickly, and then those frames that I have, so you can see it's held in there. So it's basically just giving me a flip book with my keys. And what we're going to take a look at next is we're going to take a look at some of the animation layers. And now what we can do is we have our animation. We've kind of slow things delayed it a bit, so if we wanted to make it so as she's getting up here, it's taking a little bit longer, struggling a bit more, we can just select that range here. You can just here we're going to look at middle click on this and then drag the end out. Now we're going to go instead of hitting the mark, we're going to be starting to adjust here, animation around, and you can do a lot more in here. So here we just have again. Now you can see it's taking a lot longer to get up. Frames, even if we wanted to do something where we ground from a table, just have a very straightforward at the front of this. But if we wanted to, we can add she stands up. We can grab this. So really quickly, and you can see because there's no frames before, it's just going to hold it out. And always have my original there. So really quickly, we're able to start moving our keys around. We have the motion of animation just with a few keys and just dragging things around. We can go in dynamic motion, and it's not affecting anything in the scene. And it gives us an option fast enough that I could actually do the same thing set up before. I'm just going to reset that around, but then I'm changing my animation. And what we can do is do the same thing here. With this, I'm able to try a bunch of things. You can be sitting down with your supervisor. Select the center mass. You can select multiple controls and do it. I find that if you're opposed to pose animator, you can actually pretty much what I want set keys 1 to 20. So I'm going to hit in a row just with all your poses that you know. And then we're going to start a new projectile motion. So, but now that we have it all here, say this. I'm going to say exactly frame 25. That's where she's. What we can do is put these all back onto our keys and adjust it. So if we go to animation. Export blocking. And if I turn on dynamic motion, when we click on that, what we can see it's actually changed all my keys down at the bottom that we're getting from there. So this is the same thing. Really quickly, I've been able to change everything on there. What if we wanted to start adjusting this animation? Now I've been able to retime everything and then put it in after. So it's a handy little thing, especially for original blocking animation. We needed to make quickly, and then we can do this really quickly with dynamic motion. Continue working from here. So if I open up G, from here, what we're going to take a look at next is we're going to click on that tab, and this is the basic that we did with the animation layer. Soccer ball, just hitting the mark. Now that we have our animation, now we're going to go on to advanced. Delayed it a bit, and you can see